we go. Hey, it's Darcy Loma, and happy Thoughtfully Fit Thursday. Today, I'm curious if you ever have conversations at work that you kind of avoid because they're awkward and they're hard, and like maybe there's an elephant that's not being named, and it's just easier to hope that it gets better. Well, it doesn't get better. Trust me, I know. We've been working with organizations for the last decade, and that's what we're going to explore today. And the key is to not avoid those awkward conversations, to lean into them. And I'm here with my colleague, Jill Miller, Mueller. I know you say it different than your husband's family. What do you say?
I say Mueller, but I
Okay,
respond to anything. Yeah, it's all good.
perfect. So I'm here with Jill. And I'm wondering, Jill, if you can tee it up, like it's easier. The path of least resistance is to avoid the conversations. What are the consequences of that?
The consequences are it just gets more complicated. So, like you said, it is easier just to let it go. Or sometimes we can be hopeful of, well, maybe things will just resolve on its own. It doesn't work that way. And so I actually just had a client today who was having some conflict with a coworker. She's like, she's new. Maybe I just shouldn't say anything, wait to see if it gets better. No. Right. And that's, me as a coach self-managing and not saying that, but she got there on her own of, right. Like, okay, nothing's going to change if we don't have the conversation about it. And it is tricky. I mean, Darcy, you and I, we teach this stuff. And when it comes to us needing to have these conversations, it's still awkward for us. It's not a matter of getting rid of the awkward. It's having the courage and the bravery, if you will, to have the conversations.
It is, and it's also having, I think, a bit of the skills too. I had somebody, I don't know if you remember this, Jill. It was last year or 2 years ago when we were working with a vendor. I won't share the details, it doesn't matter, but they did not produce very quality work. And so I called the owner and I said, hey, I just wanted to see if we could have a conversation. What we've been getting hasn't been at the level that we were expecting. And I wanted to talk through what we might be able to do to rectify that. And we had a lovely conversation. And he admitted that his team wasn't, they were new and they weren't fully trained and blah, blah, blah. So we made a plan. It was all good. At the end, he said, God, Darcy, I wish it was just easy for me to have conversations like this. Like, I wish I was born that way like you were. And I'm like, are you kidding? I am not. I was not born this way. I hate having these conversations. He's like, but you made it look easy. And then I realized, oh my God, it was easy. And it was easy because I've been training and practicing for a long, long time. Just like I'm going to have my first triathlon coming up in 2 weeks. And I don't have to do the same things I did 25 years ago because I've been training and practicing. It gets easier.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's not a matter of just telling yourself, oh, I can now have this tricky conversation. It's practicing using these skills. And so we have 3 tips today. 3 things that anytime you're feeling just a little bit awkward, a little bit tense, that you can try. And so the first one is say what you mean. How many times, and Darcy, I know you and I have both done this in the past, of sort of nibbling around the edges, using the Oreo cookie method, right? Of everything is fantastic except this one thing, but it's really not that big of a deal, right? When you say what you mean, part of saying what you mean might be acknowledging this is awkward for me, this is uncomfortable for me. And here's what I'm looking for. Here's what I need. Sometimes people see this of say what you mean. It's like, so you want me to be mean? You want me to be, no. Don't be mean. Say what you mean. And that requires some vulnerability.
It does. And I was thinking, okay, some strategies to be more direct. You just gave a couple of them. One, be vulnerable. Two, name what you're feeling. Name, like, this is hard for me. But I think it's really important. 3 could be ask permission. Is it okay if I just be really direct and tell you what I'm thinking and what's going on for me? And then I think another one is to just name it. Say, I'm just going to lead with a punchline, and then I'll back into it. What's going on? But I just need to tell you what's going on for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
That
Here's the
brings us. Oh, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Second tip, say what you hear. And this can be tricky sometimes because when you're in a conversation or it feels like there's a little conflict or tension, you can be so focused on here's what I need to say next and I need to respond to that. And one way to soften or just ease up some of these awkward conversations is to just take a moment and say, okay, Darcy, here's what I'm hearing you say. Do I have that right? Am I catching that correctly? And it's that simple, right? To okay, I'm gonna take a moment, and if this is the first time you're doing with somebody, you might want to give them a heads up of okay, I'm trying this new tip that I learned on Thoughtfully Fit Thursday. So if it seems a little awkward and weird, go with me here. But I'm just gonna repeat back what I heard you say so I can make sure I have it right. Couple of reasons for that. One, when people feel heard, they're more likely to work with you to find that win-win solution. The second reason is just so that you're clear on what you're hearing. Our brain, when missing information, fills in the gaps with stories. And so when taking the time to say, okay, so here's what I'm hearing. Am I hearing that correctly? You can make sure you're working in facts and not assumptions.
And I think that's an important point because if I say, so Jill, the sense I have or what I'm hearing you say is this, then you can say, well, interesting, that's what you heard. It's actually a little different than that. And that keeps that dialogue going and helps me to check myself of where did I fill in the gaps, because we do it unconsciously. I'm not consciously saying I'm going to fill in the story. It just happens. And I don't even know I'm doing it until I mirror back to you what I'm hearing, and then you can correct that. And then that brings us to the third tip, which is to say what you sense. What does that mean?
When you say what you sense, every conversation has some sort of energy or emotion underneath it. We do not talk like robots. If we did, we would just listen to the words all the time, right? Our words can sound exciting, our words can sound frustrating. And sometimes the emotion or the tone behind our voice doesn't always match what our intent is. And so again, our mind makes up stories. And this reminds me, we do a training on this specific topic of how you can stop tiptoeing around and have the conversations that you need to have. And one of the activities that we do here is we give 5 people the exact same sentence. What makes it different though is each one of them has a different emotion attached to that sentence. And so their job is to read it. And it is fascinating. Darcy, I know you've seen this too,
And the
where
audience doesn't know what the emotion is of the 5 people. The only person that knows it is the person who got the card saying you are extremely frustrated or whatever it is. The audience doesn't know.
yes. And so the activity is for the audience to guess what they're trying to convey. Sometimes people are like, yep, you're frustrated, right? Like everybody just knows. Other times there is such a wide array, right? And the reality is that happens all the time. And so the skill here is not to become clairvoyant and know what the emotion and what people are feeling in any given moment. The skill here is to check in and to say to the person you're communicating with, I'm sensing some frustration, or I'm sensing you're super excited about this. Whatever it is, the skill is just checking in with the person so that person can say, oh, you think I'm excited? I just want this to be done, right? Like I'm looking for anything.
Because a
And
lot of times there's a double signal, even in coaching when we're with clients or we're in training and say, I'm fine. Okay, you're not fine. Or somebody is crying or laughing, right? They're saying something and their body language is not matching.
And
So
so by naming those emotions, it creates an extra dynamic in the conversation that can really get to the roots and get to a place of a better conversation.
and Jill, can you clarify, are you sharing what you sense in your own feelings or the other person's or both?
That's a great point. It can be either way, right? So if you're communicating with somebody and you're sensing something from them, name it so you can check in with them. And don't hold your cards to yourself. If you're the one saying you're fine, my least favorite F word, right? If you're the one saying I'm fine, but in fact you're sensing your own frustration, your own I'm shutting down, I'm getting defensive, whatever it is, name that, right? We say name that all the time. That's the skill, to be able to name it. When you're thoughtfully fit, it's not that you're saying, oh, I'm never defensive and I never shut down and I can handle, everything perfectly and positively. No, when you're thoughtfully fit, you are aware of what you're experiencing and what you're feeling so that you can name it in that thoughtful and intentional way.
I just had a client this morning and a vice president who's really working on this hard. And the whole thing was, okay, notice and name, notice what I'm noticing and then name it. So you're making the invisible visible. And even in our team meetings, we've gotten to the point now where one person might say, oh, I'm sensing, I'm noticing, I'm starting to shut down a little. And so it's not only about the other person or about what's happening in the emotional field of the team or of the system.
Yeah. And the one thing I'll add for any of these, don't wait for it to get so far along that then it becomes this big thing. Like I'm thinking about Darcy in meetings sometimes, people have said, Jill, are you still with us? And I'm like, oh yeah, sorry, I got distracted for a moment there. And if somebody wouldn't have said something, I might have just kept going down that path and then more stories are right. And so by naming it, naming it as soon as you notice it, it makes it easier. So it's the quicker you can do it, the easier it gets.
And the stakes are lower. The longer it goes, usually it escalates. And indeed, this is what we do. We've got a whole team of coaches and trainers. We go into organizations and train and coach leaders, managers, teams, individual contributors on how to have those awkward conversations. We call it balanced conversations, about being able to balance what do you want and need with what I want and need, so you can achieve alignment in your relationship. And so if you're curious about it, reach out to us. Let us know. And we'd love to talk with you. And we're going to leave you with a core workout today, as we always do. The core is to pause, think, and act. So if you notice that there's tension rising in a meeting at work, I want to invite you to pause for a moment. Think, what do you want to convey? What are you hearing? And what are you sensing? And then take action from that new place of awareness. Thank you so much for joining us on Thoughtfully Fit Thursday. The biggest compliment is for you to share this with others, coworkers, colleagues, friends, family who you think might benefit from hearing the message of how to get thoughtfully fit. We'll see you next time. Take care.